Okay, I'm here. I'm back to share another experience that I've had, another post from the blog. Again, I'm just reading them off of the order that they've been in and trying to just get some organization here and a way to get my voice heard in and on different platforms. So the next read is taking me back in time a little bit to 15, 16, 17, 18, these years where I was sometimes maybe testing my mom a little bit, doing typical teenager things, but in some way, shape, or form, as an adult now, it's extremely hard to know that it was just a typical teenager phase and that I wasn't this mean daughter who just wanted to fight with her mom and, she kept that with her wherever she is, and that is very hard to process and move away from, is that I don't get to sit with my mom at now me almost 30 and her 60 and have her laugh and joke with me about how I made all these silly decisions and I gave her such a hard time, but she knew it was just a phase and she loved me anyway. And that's really hard. It's hard to not be able to have that conversation and get that validation that everything is okay and everything is forgiven and everything is forgotten. And I'm sure that it is, and I can train my brain to understand that it is, but of course there's nothing like the actual real experience with your mom. So I was kind of stripped of that as I reached my older years, and that's super hard. So I'm going to share my blog post that is titled Transition from Bratty Teenager to Loving Daughter. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 15 years old. 15 is a very interesting age. You think for some reason you are somewhat of an adult and can do everything. Life is pretty much all about your friends and social life, hanging out at the park, the pool, or having sleepovers, sneaking around, maybe trying to have a few drinks here or there, and having crushes or even in relationships that most likely would never last. Life at 15 is supposed to be overall easy and laid back with not much to stress about except silly social stuff with your friends. That's what life was like for me. I had a close friend group who hung out each weekend. We would go to the park, the pool, we'd walk around uptown, try to drink in one of our backyards, have sleepovers, and be carefree. I also had a boyfriend at the time, which my family was not crazy about. I felt like life's biggest concerns were what we would be doing on a Friday night and who had the coolest cell phone and who got new shoes and whose parents were on vacation. But after June of 2007, a lot of that changed for me. I had to quickly adjust, learn a new normal, and somehow learn how to balance being a bratty teenager who thinks the world revolves around her and a loving daughter who needed to step up and take care of her sick mom. All the time, I don't know if I actually was able to comprehend that. At the time, I don't know if I was actually able to comprehend that or acknowledge that, but I for sure can understand the weight of that now as I begin to dive back into this. I know I wasn't always the loving daughter that my mom needed, but I try to give myself grace knowing I was supposed to come full circle with my mom and laugh about the old days. Unfortunately, I was robbed of that opportunity and struggle knowing I will never get to apologize for my teenager days. After my mom sat me down at the table, a lot of things changed. It didn't change overnight, but over time, everything started to change. At first, I was extremely confused. I didn't understand what breast cancer was. Truthfully, I had never heard that before. I had heard the word cancer, and I associated it with death or a long-term illness. It just wasn't something I experienced or was familiar with. Then add the term breast. It seemed kind of specific to one area of the body. It seemed less daunting, less final. The first step for my mom was to get her breast removed. In our minds, we were like, great, remove the source of the issue, stop it in its tracks. However, we weren't really told my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer, which is a pretty high stage to find it. Immediately after that, things were different. My worry shifted. It was no longer about what all my friends were doing. It became thoughts of, how is my mom? Is everything okay? Is she going to die? What do we do? Are we going to survive this? What is happening? I mean, I could go on and on with the constant thoughts that rattled around inside my brain. But life took a shift. Mom was home more. Dad was even more serious than before. We had more roles around the house. There was constant company, meals being delivered, and constant conversations about cancer, and a lot of prepping us for what was to come. I remember people just looking at us differently. Not in a bad way, but you could just feel the sadness in their hearts when they looked at us. I remember even at school, the teachers looked at me differently. You could see they felt for me. I think the more and more things changed, the more and more I realized how serious the situation actually was. The one thing that never changed was the feeling of being supported by so many from day one. I think the hardest part of all of this was watching my mom lose a little bit of herself every day for about 7 years. I noticed it right away after her first surgery. If you knew my mom, you would know she was the most put-together person. She was dressed, makeup on, and hair done by 7:30 a.m. every day, except on Sundays. Sundays she always hung out in her robe for a while. She was on top of everything. She worked 5 days a week and came home each night to prepare dinner and have it on the table by 5:30. She had a list of daily errands that always got completed. Every day she made her morning phone calls that consisted of her sisters and Grandma and Jen, and her daily emails that kept everyone in the loop. She knew everyone's birthday, sent cards for every occasion, and in simple words could literally do it all. She was the most put together and independent person I had ever known. Then I remember after her breasts were removed and her first round of chemo, already some of those characteristics were gone. She looked weak, tired, sad. Honestly, in all that she went through, I think the hardest part for her was having to face us, to look at the pain we were carrying, the fear, the hurt. Even though we tried our best to not show it and to stay positive and to keep her spirits up, it was the elephant in the room, the thought that there could be a day she's not here. That what ifs were the heaviest weight to carry. What if she doesn't make it? What if this doesn't work? What if it gets worse? What if we can't help her? My mom, however, taught us early on to try really hard to not focus on the what ifs and rather appreciate where we are, what we have, and all the good that comes out of a bad situation. And from there, my positivity and strength were created. I am who I am today because of her love, her strength, endurance, her hope, faith, and battle. I'm a better person because she was my mother. This was just the beginning of our 6-year battle. So it's interesting when I think back to my teenage years, because I had said before my mom was really big on emailing, and I have tons and tons and tons of emails, like thousands of emails that I'm still processing and going through after, even 8 years. But there are still some that I cannot read because she had her own issues going on in terms of the fight that she was fighting and the strength that she needed to create. And I was fighting my own battles of trying to stay strong and trying to stay positive while also trying to be a teenager and do those sneaky things and, go behind her back, but not enough to cause her pain, but because her emotions were heightened and my emotions were heightened, there sometimes became this rift or this battle. And she loved to make you feel terrible for what you did. And I have 2 scenarios. One is like a huge scenario and one is a really simple small one. But I remember this one time that I bought a shirt and I didn't tell her that it was new. She knew it was new and she asked me, "Oh, is that a new shirt?" And I said, "No, I've had it forever." But of course she knew that it was new. And then I get an email and the email says, "How dare you lie to me? I can't believe you lied to me. I give you everything. I do this, I do that, and I just ask that you be honest." And that's one of them that I kind of cut off and stopped reading because I don't want to think of the moments that I caused her stress or that she questioned if I was a good daughter or not. And again, typical teenager mother-daughter relationships, but it's just harder when you don't get to talk about it and make light of it and joke about it. So that's the transition that I had to kind of adapt to at 15 years old and 15 and 16 years old was, how do I love on and support my mom, but also be a teenager and get to do those. But again, I wasn't processing it then. I really am just starting to kind of process all these things now, and what I actually went through at 15 years old was a lot. It was a lot of heaviness, a lot of pain, a lot of anxiousness, a lot of heavy experiences, and I'll get to those too, ones that were woken up in the middle of the night and frightened, and moments where we thought we had lost her or losing her. Like, there's just so much that goes into a 6-year battle with breast cancer, and I mean, these posts, these blogs are really just the beginning of it. So as much as I lived it at 15 and 16 and 17, and I feel like the last couple of years have been me trying to accept the grief, accept the loss, bring her along on my journey, find these signs, and like know that she's still here. But I feel like now I'm starting to process what I actually went through at 15 years old, and how that experience affects me today, or how I cope with things, or how I might handle situations, and so on and so forth. So that was an interesting one for me, thinking back to being 15 and wishing that I could sit with my mom and kind of joke about all those things and hear her tell me, you were just a kid. So if you do have your mom here, ask her for a funny story that maybe you got in trouble for, and cherish that little moment where she tells you it was okay, you were just a teenager. Thanks for listening.